My wife's diary. Mentioned a house number, but we'd never lived there. The journal was open on the kitchen counter when I came in from the garage, its spine cracked at a page filled with my wife's handwriting. Margaret had stepped out to the garden, and I was not the kind of man who read his wife's private thoughts. But the page was facing up, and one line caught me before I could look away. 1847, Thornwood Lane. I knew every street in this county. I had developed half of them myself. Thornwood Lane did not exist. I set down my coffee and read the line again. She had written it 3 times, each iteration slightly different. The first said simply the address. The second added a time, Tuesday at 4. The third was a question, when will I stop going back? The entry was dated 2 weeks prior. I'd been in meetings all that Tuesday. Margaret had said nothing unusual when I came home. I heard her footsteps on the back porch and closed the journal gently, placing it where I had found it. She came in with cut hydrangeas, their blue heads nodding over her wrist, and smiled at me with the same soft warmth she had offered for 31 years. I smiled back, but something had shifted in the room, a current beneath the floorboards that I could not name. That night I lay awake listening to her breathe, and I wondered what house she visited in her sleep. I'm 63 years old. My hands have built subdivisions, strip malls, a small hospital wing. I know the grammar of property, the logic of plats and easements, the way a deed can reveal a life. I've always believed that land tells the truth, even when people cannot. So the next morning, after Margaret left for her book club, I sat down at my desk and began to search. The county assessor's website returned nothing for 1847 Thornwood Lane. I tried neighboring counties, then the state database, then a national property aggregator. No record. I typed the address into a mapping application and watched the cursor spin. The software offered me Thornwood Court, Thornwood Circle, Thornwood Drive, but no lane. I leaned back in my chair and listened to the house settle around me, the familiar creak of the second-floor joist, the hum of the refrigerator. My wife had written an address that did not exist in any system I could access. Either she had invented it or someone had erased it. I did not confront her. I've learned over decades of negotiation that the first question you ask is rarely the one that matters. Instead, I watched. I noted the mornings she left early and the afternoons she returned with a certain distracted quiet, her keys dropped carelessly on the hall table instead of hung on the hook by the door. I observed the way she sometimes paused at the window facing east, her reflection ghosted in the glass, her lips moving without sound. She was rehearsing something, or remembering. I could not tell which. On the following Tuesday, I told her I had a site visit in the next town. I kissed her, forehead, took my truck, and parked 3 blocks from our house behind a landscaping trailer. At 10 minutes to 4, she backed out of the driveway in her sedan. I followed at a distance that felt shameful and necessary. She drove east through the old part of the county, past the mill ruins and the cemetery where my parents are buried, then turned onto a gravel road I had never noticed. The road wound through a stand of sycamores and ended at a cul-de-sac with a single house set back behind a low stone wall. The mailbox read 1847. There was no street sign. I stayed in my truck at the tree line and watched my wife park, gather a canvas bag from the passenger seat, and walk to the front door. She did not knock. She used a key. The door closed behind her and the house swallowed her whole. The structure itself was modest, a 2-story colonial with black shutters and a wraparound porch. White siding, slate roof, copper gutters gone green with age. It looked like a house from another decade, preserved in amber. No cars in the drive except hers, no lights in the windows, despite the overcast sky. I sat there for an hour, engine off, until my wife emerged with the same bag, now fuller, and drove away without looking back. I did not follow her home. I waited until her taillights vanished, then I walked up the gravel path and stood on the porch. The front door was painted the same shade of red as our own. The brass knocker was a lion's head, identical to the one I had installed at our house 15 years ago. Through the sidelight window, I could see a hallway with a runner rug in the pattern Margaret had chosen for our entryway. I pressed my face to the glass and felt my breath fog the pane. The umbrella stand was ours. The coat hooks were ours. The framed photograph on the wall showed our daughter at her college graduation, the same photograph that hung in our living room. I stepped back and looked at the house number. The numerals were hand-painted, slightly crooked, in a style I recognized because I had painted them myself, or believed I had, on the pillar of a house 30 miles away. I drove home in silence. Margaret was in the kitchen making dinner, humming a tune I did not recognize. I told her the site visit had gone well. She asked if I was hungry. I said I was. We ate together and talked about the weather, about our daughter's upcoming visit, about the leak in the guest bathroom that I kept meaning to fix. I watched my wife's hands as she passed me the bread, the familiar map of veins and tendons, the wedding ring I had placed there 3 decades ago. I wondered whose hands had built that other house and what part of her lived inside it. Over the next week, I gathered what I could without alerting her. The county recorder's office had no deed for 1847 Thornwood Lane. The tax assessor's parcel map showed the road as an unimproved right-of-way with no structures. I pulled historical aerials from the state archive and found nothing but trees where the house now stood. Either the building had materialized in the last few years, or someone had gone to considerable trouble to keep it off the books. I knew how to hide property. I had done it myself, legally, for clients who valued privacy. But this was different. This was erasure. I returned to the house on a Thursday when Margaret had a dentist appointment. This time I brought a camera and a notepad. The mailbox was empty. The curtains were drawn. I walked the perimeter, photographing the foundation, the utility connections, the septic vent. The house had power, water, and gas. Someone was paying for those services. I noted the meter numbers and wrote down the service addresses stamped on the equipment. Inside, through the rear windows, I could see a kitchen that mirrored ours down to the placement of the coffee maker. The living room held the same sofa, the same bookshelves, the same rug worn thin in front of the fireplace. But there were differences. The walls were hung with photographs I did not recognize, images of Margaret in places I had never seen, standing beside people I did not know. In one frame, she wore a dress I had never bought her, a deep green that made her hair look almost black. In another, she sat on a porch swing with a man whose face was turned away from the lens. I pressed my palm against the glass and felt the cold seep into my bones. I called the utility companies from a payphone in town, a relic outside the hardware store. I gave them the meter numbers and asked for the billing address. The power company connected me to a supervisor who said the account was held by a trust with no individual name attached. The trust paid electronically, on time, every month. The water company told me the same. The gas company refused to release any information without a subpoena. That night, I asked Margaret about her day. She described the dentist, the drive home, the book she was reading. She did not mention a house in the woods. She did not mention a key that fit a door I had never opened. I watched her face for tells, the micro-expressions I had learned to read in contract negotiations, but she was serene. Either she was innocent of deception, or she had practiced this performance for so long that it had become indistinguishable from truth. I began to reconstruct our history. I pulled our tax returns, our bank statements, our credit card records. I looked for payments I could not explain, withdrawals that did not match receipts. Margaret handled the household accounts, a division of labor we had agreed upon decades ago. I had trusted her completely. Now I traced every transaction for the past 5 years, and I found them. Small cash withdrawals, $50 here, $80 there, never enough to trigger a report, accumulating to thousands over time. The money had gone somewhere. I could not prove it had gone to the house, but I could not prove it had not. I hired a title researcher, a woman I had worked with on commercial deals, and asked her to dig into the trust that held the utility accounts. She called me a week later with a name, Thornwood Holdings LLC, registered in Delaware, with a resident agent who existed only on paper. The LLC had been formed 12 years earlier, the same year Margaret's mother had died and left her a modest inheritance. I had assumed that money had gone into our joint accounts. I checked the probate records and found a discrepancy. The inheritance was larger than Margaret had disclosed by almost exactly the amount needed to buy a house outright in this part of the county. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my office and looked at the photograph of our wedding, Margaret in white lace, her hand in mine, her eyes bright with a future neither of us could see. I had believed I knew her. I had believed our life was a shared construction, built together, brick by brick. Now I understood that she had been building something else, a parallel structure, a second life that existed just beyond the edge of my vision. The question was not whether she had betrayed me. The question was what the betrayal meant. An affair would have been simple, a wound I could name and address. But this was stranger. She had built a replica of our home, furnished it with our possessions, hung it with photographs of a life I had not lived. She had created an alternate version of us, a shadow marriage that existed only in that hidden house. I did not know whether to grieve or to admire the architecture of it. I decided to confront her on a Sunday, after church. We were not religious people, but we attended services for the community, for the rhythm it gave our weeks. I waited until we were home, until she had changed out of her dress and was sitting in the garden with a cup of tea. I carried the photographs I had taken, the utility records, the title research. I placed them on the table between us and sat down across from her. She looked at the papers for a long moment. Then she looked at me. "You found it," she said. "I found it. I wondered when you would." There was no guilt in her voice, no apology. She spoke as if we were discussing a renovation project, a problem to be solved together. I waited for her to explain. "The house belonged to my mother," she said. "Not the one you knew. Another one, before she married my father. She lived there with a man named Richard, a man she loved before she learned what love could cost. He died in an accident the year before I was born. She never told anyone. She kept the house, paid the taxes, visited once a month until she was too ill to drive. When she died, she left it to me in a separate trust, one my father never knew about. I found the key in her jewelry box, and I found the letter she had written to Richard, and I understood. Understood what? That some loves cannot be shared, some lives cannot be merged. She kept that house as a place where she could be the woman she had been before, the woman who had loved without caution, without compromise. I kept it for the same reason. I looked at the photographs on the table, the images of my wife in places I had never seen. Who is the man in these pictures? No one. There is no man. The photographs are composites, made from old images and digital editing. I wanted to imagine what her life might have looked like, what my life might have looked like, if I had been born into that other story. I never brought anyone there. I never betrayed you in the way you are imagining. The house is a museum, not a meeting place. I wanted to believe her. I studied her face and saw no deception, only a sorrow so old it had become part of her features, like the lines around her eyes, like the gray at her temples. She had kept a secret for 12 years, a secret that had cost me nothing except the illusion that I knew her completely. I did not know if that was a betrayal or a kindness. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would have fixed it. You would have sold the house, donated the money, turned my grief into a project. I needed a place that was mine alone, a place where I could sit with my mother's memory without explaining it, without justifying it, without making it productive. You are a builder, and I love you for it. But some things are not meant to be built. Some things are meant only to be held." I sat with her words for a long time. The tea grew cold between us. The shadows lengthened across the garden. I thought about the houses I had built over 40 years, the subdivisions and strip malls, the careful logic of foundations and load-bearing walls. I thought about the house in the woods, the duplicate of our own, the place where my wife had gone to be someone I had never met. "I want to see it," I said. "Not to fix it, just to see it." She considered this. Then she reached into her pocket and handed me a key. I drove out alone the next morning. The gravel road was quiet, the sycamores just beginning to turn. I parked in the drive and walked to the door, the red door, the lion's head knocker. The key fit perfectly. Inside, the house smelled of lavender and old paper. The furniture was arranged exactly as ours, the rugs and curtains and books all in their proper places. But there were differences I had not seen through the windows. A writing desk by the front window held a stack of letters and envelopes addressed to a man named Richard, never sent. A closet in the upstairs hallway was filled with dresses in sizes that had not fit my wife in 30 years. clothes that must have belonged to her mother. A bedroom at the end of the hall was untouched, the bed made, the curtains drawn, a photograph on the nightstand of a young couple standing in front of this very house, the woman's face unmistakably a younger version of my mother-in-law. I sat on the edge of that bed and looked at the photograph. The man beside her was handsome in the way of old movies, dark hair swept back, eyes crinkled with laughter. He had died before. Margaret was born, but he had shaped her life as surely as I had. This house was his ghost, and her mother's ghost, and now it was part of my wife in a way I could not undo. I locked the door behind me when I left. I drove home and found Margaret in the kitchen, waiting. I handed her the key without a word. She took it and slipped it back into her pocket. "What will you do?" she asked. "Nothing. The house is yours. The secret is yours. I will not ask you to explain it again, and I will not ask you to give it up. But I need one thing from you." "What?" "When you go there, tell me. Not where, not why. Just that you are going. I do not need to know the details. I just need to know that you are not disappearing." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her eyes, a wall coming down that I had not known was there. "I can do that," she said. "We have lived with this arrangement for 3 years now. Once a month, sometimes twice, she tells me she's going to the house. I do not ask questions. I do not follow. I trust that she is doing what she needs to do, holding a grief that is not mine to carry, honoring a love that existed before I was part of her story. I have thought often about what I learned. My wife did not betray me in any way I had feared. She did not take a lover, did not steal my money, did not build a life designed to replace me. She built a memorial, a place where she could be a daughter to a mother who had never told her the whole truth, a place where she could imagine the life she might have lived if history had bent a different way. It was strange, and it was secret, and it was not something I would have chosen for her. But it was hers. I am a builder. I have spent my life making things solid, permanent, visible. I have believed that what matters can be measured, appraised, recorded in a deed. But my wife taught me that some things exist outside the systems I understand. Some houses are not on any map. Some lives are lived in rooms that only one person can enter. I do not go to Thornwood Lane anymore. The house is hers, and I have made my peace with that. But sometimes, on quiet evenings, I look at my wife across the dinner table, and I wonder which version of her is sitting there, the woman who married me, or the daughter of a woman who loved a man named Richard, or someone else entirely, someone I will never meet. I have learned to live with the mystery. It is not comfortable, but it is true. And in the end, that is the only foundation that holds.